Juliet, my dear daughter,
As you prepare to leave for the city to live with your aunt and uncle,
I want to remind you to always be careful and mindful of your surroundings,
the city can be a challenging and overwhelming place.
especially for a young girl like you. Always remember that you are loved and valued, no matter what. Don't let anyone make you feel otherwise.
Your aunt and uncle may have their own way of doing things, but that doesn't mean you have to compromise your values and principles.
Be respectful and obedient.
But also don't be afraid to speak up for yourself and express your own opinions.
You have a unique voice and perspective, and the world needs to hear it.
Also, be careful around your uncle. I've heard rumors about his behavior towards young girls,
And I want you to be cautious.
don't be alone with him.
And don't hesitate to reach out to me or your aunt if you feel uncomfortable or scared. Most importantly, remember that you are strong and capable,
You have been raised with good values and principles,
and I have no doubt that you will make wise choices.
keep your head held high.
And never forget that you are loved and cherished, no matter what.
As Juliet traveled to the city, she faced numerous challenges in her aunt's husband's hands.
He was a cruel and manipulative man who took
Advantage of Juliet's innocence and vulnerability.
He would often make inappropriate comments and gestures towards her, making her feel uncomfortable and scared.
Despite her mother's warnings
Juliet was not prepared for the level of abuse.
and mistreatment she suffered at the hands of her uncle, she felt trapped and alone, with no one to turn to for help. But she remembered her mother's words of advice and found
The strength to keep going, even in the darkest of times. Juliet, determined to escape the abuse and trauma,
packed a small bag and left her aunt's house.
she walked for hours, unsure of where she was going.
But knowing she had to get away,
As she crossed a busy street,
a car came speeding around the corner, striking her with a loud thud.
Juliet's world went dark as she was knocked unconscious. The driver, frantic with worry, called for an ambulance.
And Juliet was rushed to the hospital.
For a week, she lay in a coma, her body battered and bruised. Back at home, Juliet's mother grew worried when she couldn't reach her daughter.
She called her sister's house, but her sister and brother-in-law lied, telling her that Juliet was fine, just busy with school.
Juliet's mother had no idea that her
Daughter was fighting for her life in a hospital bed,
She continued to call, but her sister and brother-in-law kept up the charade.
hiding the truth from her.
As the days passed, Juliet's condition remained critical,
The hospital staff tried to contact her family.
but they had no accurate information.
Juliet was a Jane Doe, a mysterious patient with no known relatives.
Meanwhile, Juliet's mother was beside herself with worry. She sensed that something was wrong, but she had no idea what. Little did she know, her daughter's life was hanging in the balance. Juliet's mother couldn't shake off the feeling that something was wrong.
She had been having a nagging sense of unease for days, and it only seemed to intensify as the hours passed.
One night, she had a dream that felt more real than any dream she had ever had. In the dream, Juliet was standing in front of her, waving and smiling.
But as she reached out to hug her daughter, Juliet vanished into thin air.
Juliet's mother jerked awake, her heart racing.
She jumped out of bed and began to pray, asking God to protect her daughter and keep her safe.
As soon as morning came, Juliet's mother knew she had to take action. She couldn't just sit around and wait for news from her sister.
She packed a small bag and set off for the city, determined to see Juliet for herself and make sure she was okay. As she arrived at her sister's house,
Juliet's mother was greeted with an eerie silence.
she knocked on the door, but there was no answer.
She tried calling out to her sister, but there was only silence. Just as she was starting to get worried,
The door opened, and her sister stood before her, looking pale and shaken.
"What's wrong?" Juliet's mother asked, her heart sinking. Her sister hesitated before speaking the words that would change everything. "Juliet is missing." Juliet's mother felt like she had been punched in the gut.
She stumbled backward, her mind reeling with questions.
"What do you mean she's missing?" she demanded.
When did she go missing? Her sister shook her head, tears streaming down her face. I don't know, she sobbed.
"She left the house a week ago, and we haven't seen her since." Juliet's mother felt a wave of panic wash over her.
She knew she had to act fast to find her daughter.
She took a deep breath, steeled herself, and began to make plans to search for Juliet. Juliet's mother knew she had to act fast to find her daughter.
She decided to go
To the police station to report Juliet missing and ask
for their assistance in searching for her. As she arrived at the police station,
She was greeted by a friendly officer who listened attentively as
she explained the situation. Please, you have to help me find my daughter, Juliet's mother pleaded. I'm worried sick about her.
The officer nodded sympathetically. "Don't worry, ma'am.
We'll do everything we can to help you find Juliet. Can you tell me more about your sister and her husband? Did they say anything about Juliet's disappearance?
Juliet's mother hesitated, unsure of how much to reveal.
But something about the officer's kind demeanor put her at ease.
To be honest, I don't trust them, she said.
They've been acting strange, and I think they might be hiding something. The officer's expression turned serious.
I see. Well, we'll definitely look into that.
Can you give me their contact information?
Juliet's mother nodded and provided the officer with her
Sisters and brother-in-law's names, addresses, and phone numbers.
The officer nodded, making a note on his pad.
We'll bring them in for questioning.
In the meantime, we'll start searching for Juliet.
Can you give me a recent photo of her?
Juliet's mother rummaged through her purse and produced a photo of Juliet.
The officer took it from her and promised to do everything in his power to find
Juliet and bring her home safely.
As Juliet's mother left the police station, she felt a glimmer of hope. She knew that the police would do everything they could to find Juliet,
and she was determined to do the same. Juliet's mother returned to her sister's house, determined to get some answers.
But as she approached the door,
she was met with a shocking sight. Her belongings were scattered all over the front yard.
Her sister stood in the doorway, her arms crossed and a scowl on her face.
You are not welcome here, she spat. Leave now. Juliet's mother was taken aback, but she refused to back down. She pulled out her phone and dialed the police, her hands shaking with anger. The police arrived quickly, and Juliet's mother explained the situation to them.
The officers turned to her sister and brother-in-law, their faces stern.
We need to ask you some questions, one of the officers said. Juliet's sister and brother-in-law exchanged a nervous glance.
But they were quickly separated and taken in for questioning.
It wasn't long before they cracked under the pressure. Juliet's sister broke down in tears,
confessing that they had been abusing
Juliet and that she had run away after a particularly brutal incident. Juliet's brother-in-law, on the other hand, remained defiant, but the police found evidence of his abuse on Juliet's phone, records and computer history. The police detained them both, refusing to release them until Juliet was found safe and sound. As the news spread, the community rallied around Juliet's mother,
offering their support and assistance in the search for Juliet.
Scouring the city and surrounding areas for any sign of Juliet, Juliet's mother held on to hope,
praying that her daughter would be found alive and well. She knew that she had to be strong for Juliet, and she was determined to fight for her daughter's justice. The police launched a massive search operation. As the search for Juliet continued,
the police released her picture to the media, hoping that someone would come forward with information about her whereabouts.
The news spread like wildfire,
and soon Juliet's face was plastered on every television screen and newspaper in the city. It was then that a doctor at a local hospital recognized Juliet from the news broadcast. He had been treating a young girl who had been brought in with severe injuries, and he realized that it was Juliet. The doctor immediately contacted the police,
who rushed to the hospital to confirm the doctor's suspicions. When they arrived, they found Juliet lying in a hospital bed, her body bruised and battered. But despite her physical injuries, her spirit remained unbroken.
Juliet's mother was overjoyed when she received the news that her daughter had been found.
She rushed to the hospital, where she was reunited with Juliet. The reunion was emotional,
with both Juliet and her mother breaking down in tears as they hugged each other tightly. I'm so sorry, Juliet, her mother whispered, holding her daughter close.
I should have protected you better. Juliet smiled weakly, her eyes filled with love and forgiveness.
It's not your fault, MOM, she said. I am just glad to be safe now.
As they hugged, the police took Juliet's aunt and uncle into custody,
charging them with abuse and neglect. Juliet's journey to recovery would be long and difficult.
But with her mother by her side, she knew she could face anything.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe to our YouTube channel for interesting story. Thank you. What did you learn in this episode?